Okay, since I'm not totally disgusted with this thing anymore, and it's finally been off of the ground, under power, flying really well. CC3D, this is the eBay $120, $130 range robocat knockoff, which you won't be able to recognize it because this one's completely modded. This is my first build. I apologize, I know the wires don't look all that great, but I actually took what would have been the bridge-like structure that sort of like the spine of the quadcopter, and then the yellow canopy, which was mine was yellow, goes on the front of that. But when I first tried to fly this thing, it just seemed top heavy to me. So I disassembled the spine, the bridge, the upper frame, and I actually took one of the pieces that actually go in the middle that either hold your FPV gear or battery or the transmitter or whatever your imagination comes up with. But I've had nothing but problems with this thing. I even tried to put it on clean flight. The firmware update went well, and it would only link up to clean flight like every 30 attempts. So not good. Not good at all when you're trying to do on-the-fly tuning. So finally, I got the bootloader file and got it back on Libre Pilot. Totally disappointed, and usually what almost 100% always is just pilot error. I just forgot to save my neutral points on my motor values, and that's why it was flying like it was. It wasn't flying, it was just spinning motors is what it was, and hopping over the ground like a cricket with no legs. So I still have the lower frame as it should be with the side supports there, but what I took was my plastic flight board standoffs and made some lower pillars, because the pillars that come with it they're enormous. They're like 2.5 inches. So I just have enough room now just for a little bit of clearance on my receiver. And I made a battery shelf. That's where the battery would have been. It's lower now. Center of gravity is much lower on this now than it was with its stock build. But the ESCs that came with it, they were supposedly 20 amp. Look like Little B or the B knockoffs. It didn't even have a name brand on it. It just said Opto, 20 amp. 3 out of the 4 worked. The 4th one, which was the back right motor, ended up burning up during my first tuning flights. Within 2 minutes, it burned up. Talk about... I actually was so upset with it, this thing got put away for 2 weeks before I even looked at it again. But I ended up getting those Emaxx 20 amps. They're a little heavy, but this thing still flies relatively well with it. They don't get hot. The battery gets a little warm, but not hot. I'm running the 6045s, I believe. Yeah, props. What else? Oh, there's a lot of videos out there with these Emaxx 20 amp ESCs where they're having issues with them, where they won't even spin. Because a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll calibrate the ESC before they even build, which is not a bad idea. That way you can get your low and your high throttle values. But what people are doing is they go to throw this into what would be the typical ESC calibration, whereas you would just turn your throttle stick all the way high, plug in the battery, turn on the transmitter. Or I might have got that wrong. But you know what I'm talking about. But what they're doing is they're leaving it in that ESC calibration too long, and it's going into an options type menu where you can set your brake, you can set like low voltage cutoff points, overheat values. That's where they're messing up. I just plug this thing into a receiver, throttle of course, a high value on the throttle stick, plug in your battery on your quad, it'll make a beep beep, and then as soon as you hear those first set of beeps, throttle down, and it'll do its regular CC3 startup sound. That's how you know you've done it right. If you do not hear that, you didn't do it right. If it's making a bunch of crazy beeps, you're in some kind of options menu, which it's an awesome menu, but you don't want to get in there messing around and change a value by mistake, and then you start flipping out because you can't find out what's wrong. But I like the ESCs. They're working great for me. I recommend them. Maybe not for this small of a quad though. They're a little heavy, but these were in my price range. No, I zip tied it too. I actually took that, like I said, what would have been a mounting plate, and hot glued it to the nose, hot glued the flight board to that, and then zip tied it, including the wires, into the CC3D board rather. So it really kind of helps with orientation. I'm still flying line of sight. I have 2 FPV cameras and every transmitters, antennas, and I still am just enjoying the transition from toy grade quad to these bad little bastards. So maybe I've inspired someone, maybe someone's got something smart to say. All in all, I like the way this thing flies for $120, $130. Of course, I was set back $36 for those ESCs, but you know, you get what you pay for. So for a total of $156, I got quad, transmitter, and receiver, and it flies really well.